Good evening, everybody. It's about time for us to get started tonight. Welcome you to Wednesday night devotional at Petersville. If you want to mark your invitation song, it is 396. 396 will be the song after Terry's devotional. 396, no, not one. And then before we have our Devo, we'll sing 147. 147, I stand amazed. 147.
I stand amazed in the presence of Jesus the Nazarene, and wonder how he could love me, a sinner condemned and clean. How marvelous, how wonderful, and my song shall ever be. How marvelous, how wonderful is my Savior's love for me. For he was in the garden, he prayed not cruel but kind. He had no tears for his own griefs, but sang across the blood for mine. How marvelous, how wonderful, and my song shall ever be. How marvelous, how wonderful is my Savior's love for me. The ransomed glory, his face I at last shall see. Will be my joy through the ages to sing of his love for me. How marvelous, how wonderful, and my song shall ever be. How marvelous, how wonderful is my Savior's love for me.
Good evening. The psalmist says in Psalm 118, verse 24, "This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it." You know, some days are good, some days are very trying, some days are very rewarding, some are filled with disappointments. But in the full scope of things, we should be, as the psalmist says, "This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it." Are there some days that you really look forward to? How about your birthday? Anybody look forward to the birthday? You know, as a kid, birthdays were really, really special. And then as we get older, we're reminded that we're what? We're growing older. And we have the aches and the pains. You know, March is a month filled with birthdays for Petersville. I think I counted 34 birthdays in the month of March on the calendar. We got 3 today. Peggy Cooper, Phyllis Lauderdale, and Brad Scott all had birthdays today. So we rejoice with them. Our physical family has a lot of birthdays in March. Marcia's was the 1st. Emily's is the 11th. She shared the same birthday that my mom had on the 11th. Mine's later this month. And then Sarah and Will share the same birthday on March the 28th. So we've got a lot of birthdays. But you know, I'm reminded in James chapter 4, verse 13 and 14, says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we'll go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell and make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow, for what is your life? If it's even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. You know, we enjoy birthdays, but life is short, folks. Life is short. But I want to talk to you about a more serious birthday. Mine was August the 28th, 1975. When was your spiritual birthday? I hope you remember it. I can remember mine vividly. It was in a gospel meeting at Stony Point. I was 13 years old. I had made my mind up that was going to be the night. Legs shaking, arms clenching to the bench there in front of me. But then you make that decision, and it's the best decision that you'll ever make. You know, like I said, I was 13 years young, had the world in front of me. Did I know what it meant to take up the cross and follow after Him? I had an idea. Did I know the depth of it? No. But you know, that's something that we realize as we grow and mature. How about you? Did you know the depth of it? Of taking up His cross and following Him? You know, our physical bodies get older with every birthday. Our physical bodies wear out. We are born, but we're made to die. We're going to die eventually. Ecclesiastes 3, 1 and 2 says, to everything there's a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, time to be born, a time to die. And Ecclesiastes 1, 4 says, one generation passes away, and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. So what about your spiritual health? We know that our physical body decays, it gets older. But our spiritual health, even when we're getting older, should be what? Should be growing. Should be growing. If you got your Bibles, turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 4. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Starting in verse 16, it says, therefore we do not lose heart. Even though our outward man is perishing, yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we do not look at things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. I hope and pray that when people see you getting older, celebrating another birthday, your hair turning another color, I hope that they see more than that. I hope that they see that you are being renewed day by day spiritually. We may have some here tonight that have never named the name of Christ. I don't know of a better time to do it than tonight. Turn with me to Acts chapter 2. We know that Peter preached that great gospel sermon on the day of Pentecost. Starting in verse 36, he says, therefore let all the house of Israel know assuredly that God has made this Jesus, whom you crucified, both Lord and Christ. Now when they heard this, they were cut to the heart and said to Peter and the rest of the apostles, men and brethren, what shall we do? And Peter said to them, repent and let every one of you be baptized in the name of Jesus Christ for the remission of sins, and you shall receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. For the promises to you and to your children and all who are far off, as many as the Lord our God will call. And with many words he testified and exhorted them, saying, be saved from this perverse generation. Then those who gladly received his word were baptized, and that day about 3,000 souls were added to them. Turn with me to Romans chapter 6. Romans chapter 6, starting in verse 1. What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Certainly not. How shall we who died to sin live any longer in it? Or do you not know that as many of us as were baptized into Jesus Christ were baptized into his death? Therefore we were buried with him through baptism into death, that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. So I hope when you have that next physical birthday, I hope that you'll think also about your spiritual birthday. So as you're growing older physically, I hope that you're being renewed day by day in your walk with Christ. If we can help you in any way tonight, we invite you to come as we together stand and sing.
There's no friend like the lowly Jesus. No, not one. No, not one. None can heal all my soul's diseases. No, not one. No, not one. Jesus knows all about our troubles. He will guide till the day is done. There's not a friend like the lowly Jesus. No, not one. No, not one. There's not a count that he is not near us. No, not one. No, not one. No wrestle arm that his love can cheer us. No, not one. No, not one. Jesus knows all about our struggles. He will guide till the day is done. There's not a friend like the lowly Jesus. No, not one. No, not one.
I do thank you for being here with us, our midweek Bible study. I do appreciate Lucas and Dad for filling in me the last couple of services. We've had a little bit of sickness running through our house, but it is good to be back with you tonight. I do hope you grabbed an opportunity worksheet on your way in. A couple of things I do want to make note of. We do have our CP telethon upcoming this Sunday. We'll be taking up money. Dad probably knows how many years we've been doing this, but we've done it for a long time, as long as I can remember. So we do look forward to Sunday. If you can help give towards the UCP Center, they would greatly appreciate that, like you've done in years past. Compassion cards, our Peppers class will be signing those this week. Ladies' prayer meeting will be Sunday night after evening services. They'll be putting together encouragement bags for Shoals Shelter. That's for girls 5th grade and up. So if you can come to it, please come. Dinner will also be served. Founders Day at Heritage Christian will be Monday. One of our own, Brother Adam, was selected as one of their Founders Days award recipients. So if you can go support him and encourage him, that will be Monday, and we are proud of Adam for that. We are in continued need for different things for Lads to Leaders. That's coming up in just under a month. We do look forward to that, but if you can help with snacks, I don't know, do we have the meat taken care of, Karen? I'm not sure if I meant to look at the sign-up sheet, and I didn't do so before I come in, but if we still have opportunities there and you can help in cooking that meat, that would be greatly appreciated as well. We do want to remember all of those in our prayer list. I haven't been made aware of any additional changes that have been made. We are glad that Brother Dave Arney is now at home. He's out of rehab and at home. We do want to add Dennis Brooks to our list and remember him in our thoughts and prayers. He has been diagnosed with kidney cancer. He's got surgery upcoming. That is the brother to Charlotte Rogers. So we do want to be mindful of him during this time. We want to be mindful of a few families. We want to express our deepest sympathy to Gary Pinnell over the passing of Gary's cousin, Ricky Parrish. His service will be held on Friday.
Also, we want to express our deepest sympathy to the Bobby Brewer family over his passing last week. There will be a celebration of life March 21st at Zip City Community Center from 2 to 4. I also have a card. This is from Ann Sharp. It says, "Dear Petersville Church family, I sincerely thank you for the countless cards you sent to J.A. in the last months of his life. The Parkinson's disease and Lewy body diminished his mind and body as the days went by. J.A. loved the church and each of you, and he was so disappointed when he couldn't attend services anymore. He is now at peace, and his suffering is done. Please continue to remember me in prayer because there will be many difficult days ahead. May God richly bless each of you." And again, that's from Ann Sharp. So please continue to remember her in your thoughts and prayers as well. Does anybody have any other announcements before we're dismissed the classes tonight? If not, we do hope to see you back with us Sunday morning as class starts at 9, service at 10. At this time, we'll be dismissed to our classes.
There we go. All right. Whew. Now that the riffraff is gone, I wasn't pointing at you, Jimmy. Oh, some of the riffraff is still here, but that's okay. We love it. That's right, especially. Just kidding. I think it's great. I really like watching, especially the kids get up and go to class and how excited they are about that. All the work that goes into preparing those things and getting that stuff all ready to go every week. It's a lot of work. Some of you in here have taught classes in the past, and you know what goes into that, and we are always looking for people who are willing to step into that role and help out. So getting the opportunity to go to Bible class is a privilege, right? If we don't have teachers, then we're not going to have classes. And so spending time preparing those lessons, getting those ready, and also making it something that our kids enjoy being a part of. That's also a really big thing, and that's a little harder to do sometimes. It takes a special person. I know that I can think of teachers that I had in Bible classes growing up that made a big impact in my life and encouraged me and made things enjoyable and had good ways to do that. And we are definitely blessed with a lot of folks at Petersville that do the same thing today. I'm always thankful when I think about that. So to kind of give you kind of an overall picture of how our class schedule is kind of working, and then that will help you understand what we're doing in here for this quarter on Wednesday nights. Of course, typically every year we have a summer series on Wednesday nights, and so starting in June, the next quarter after this one, then we will have guest speakers coming in, and I'm excited about that series. This year we're going to do something a little bit different than what we have done in the past, and we'll talk more about that later. But so for the summertime, we've got our quarter lined out. We've got the guest speakers that will be coming in. We'll have summer events like Vacation Bible School and that kind of thing. And so this quarter, I'm going to be in here. I just finished up a Sunday morning class in the auditorium, and that finished up in February. And now we are starting a new series of classes that are mostly on Sunday morning, but then it's also coming here in our Wednesday night Bible class as well for the auditorium. So what I mean by that is we are working on fitting our Bible classes into this big year-long theme that I've been talking about in our sermons on Sunday morning. This is us, right? That's our theme. We are calling this a defining year, and that's a literal thing. We are trying to get a good glimpse, a good image, a good idea of what makes Petersville, Petersville, right? And so there are a lot of different things that we're doing with that. There's a lot of different ways that we are trying to make that beneficial for us. And one of the things that we're doing is we have a set of 3 Bible classes that will rotate to different groups of people. I'm teaching one of them, Lucas is teaching one of them, and then the elders together are teaching the 3rd class. And the plan is that we will rotate our class material 3 times to different groups. And so I will teach one of the Sunday morning classes in that back hallway for a quarter, and then the elders will be in another class, and then Lucas will be in the 3rd class. And then after that quarter's over, we'll swap. And I'll teach the same material, but I'll take it to another one of those classrooms. And the elders will swap and do that. And so we'll do that through all of those groups. But then what we realized was, because there's only 3 classes, and there's really only 3 teachers and 3 groups, that the auditorium was going to kind of be left out of that. And so on Wednesday nights, I'm going to bring in here the material that I'm going to be doing in those 3 classes on Sunday mornings. So it's all going to fit together. But if you want to know what the elders are teaching, or if you want to know what Lucas is teaching that complement what I'm going to be doing, then you'll have to go to one of their classes on Sunday morning. You'll have to find a place to slide in and get their material, find out where they're going to be, when they're going to be, and you can learn that. And I'll talk a little bit more about what those are, but it all is about connection, calling it the connections. And so I want us to think about that a little bit. And I'm going to tell you what my connection is for this class, for the class that I'm doing in these different groups as we get into the material a little bit. But I want to start with the idea of an identity crisis, right? When you think about somebody having an identity crisis, what are some things that you think of if somebody says, oh, I'm having an identity crisis? What comes to your mind? You don't know who you are, right? When do people kind of typically go through identity crisis? What? I heard that. Say it louder, G. Okay, yeah, we don't want that on the microphone, but there are certain transitions in life, aren't there? There are, aren't there? There are transitions that we go through in life, right? That's one of them for our ladies a lot of times. A lot of times people, when they retire, right, they go through an identity crisis because their sense of who they are was tied up in what they did, and they did it for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And now all of a sudden they're not doing that anymore, and they're left wondering, well, who am I if I don't have this anymore, right? A midlife crisis, that's a term we hear a little bit more often, right? You have a midlife crisis. You get to this point, and really what happens, what I have understood that to mean is there comes a time in life when we start to understand we're not going to live forever. And that hits different people at different times, but we really, like we all have in our head, yeah, okay, we get that. But there's some point in our life when our parents get sick and we have to start taking care of them. Or people close to us that they're the same age as us, but they start getting like sick. And like, people my age don't get cancer. What are you talking about? People my age don't get heart disease. People my age don't. And then you start to realize, oh, wait a minute. Maybe they do. Because the years are catching up, right? And so a midlife crisis is that, for a lot of people, it's that first time they realize, you know what? There is a clock that is ticking. And then we have to adjust that to figure that out. A lot of different reasons why people would go through what we consider an identity crisis. You may have had some of those times. You may have had those moments. I know that I've been through them before, and a lot of people go through them at different transitions and different points in their life when they don't know because something changes or the way that you see yourself changes. So we talked about identity as one of the three big topics in the class that I just finished on Sunday morning, right? We looked at the three big questions that change every teenager. And really we learned in that class that they don't just affect teenagers, they still affect us today. And we need to answer them for ourselves, and then we can help young people while they're seeking answers as well. But those three issues were identity, belonging, and purpose. And so this idea of who am I plays a pretty big part. I have a book that's in my office, and it's not the book that's going to form the majority of this class, but it's a book that I've been reading that I think bears on a lot of things. I got it because I feel like it's very pertinent. The name of the book is The Reason for Church. The Reason for Church, by a man named Brad Edwards. And he talks about how we live in this anxious, divided, hyper-individualistic society. And because of that, we have seen a lot of people turn away from the church. And he's making a point in this entire book. The point of this book is the exact reasons why people are quitting church are the very reasons why we need it more than ever, or we have always needed it and still need it today. The anxiety that people are having, the individualism, the isolationism that people are feeling, the divisiveness, the division that exists in the world. He says those are issues that can directly be impacted if the church is allowed to be what it's supposed to be in our lives. And so in this entire book, he makes an argument for church. He says we still need church. And for us, right, for those of us who are willing to set aside an hour of Bible class time on Wednesday night, we understand that for the most part. But you can also look around and you can think about people who used to sit in this room and don't sit here anymore. Or people that you know that are still here, they're still with us, but they have substituted church with something else in their life. It doesn't mean what it used to mean to them. It's not fulfilling that role anymore. And so there's a very real need for a book that makes this argument that church is still vitally important. And one of the reasons is because of our identity. There's a chapter in that book on identity and names. And so I thought it would be interesting and maybe a little bit helpful to think about this for a little bit tonight. How important were names in the Bible? Can you think of some examples in the Bible when people, their name was significant for some reason or another? Who can you think of? Joshua, it means salvation is from God, or salvation is of the Lord. Salvation from God. Of course, Joshua is a Hebrew word. Do you know some of you know the Greek version of Joshua is Jesus, right? When Mary was raising her little baby boy, she didn't call him Jesus. She called him Joshua, right? And she didn't call herself Mary, by the way. She called herself Miriam. But that's those Hebrew names, because those names in Hebrew oftentimes meant something important. Joshua's a good example. Who else? Yeah, some of these apostles, right? And it wasn't just the name that they were born with, but what did Jesus do to a lot of them? He changed their name, didn't he? He gave them a different name. I know that you're Simon Bar-Jonah, but from now on, Jesus says, I'm going to call you what? Peter, because that's a rock. And on this rock, I can build my church, right? And so Peter, that's a name that got changed. Who else's name? Other apostles, right? James and John. What did Jesus call James and John? He gave them the nickname the Sons of Thunder. I think I've mentioned that before. I grew up watching wrestling, and I feel like the apostles had wrestling nicknames, right? Peter was the Rock. There is a Rock who's a wrestler right now, right? Dwayne Johnson. And then two guys, a tag team match. You don't want to go up against the Sons of Thunder. That's just automatically. But Jesus, these were guys who said to Jesus, we're ready to call down fire from heaven on this little Samaritan village because they disrespected you. You want us to blast them out of the water with fire from heaven? We'll do it, God. Right? He said, they're sons of thunder. They're thunderous. But there was also a time when that got away from them too, didn't it? Who else in the Bible had names that were significant or important or changed? That's exactly right. We have this Pharisee named Saul. Now, I wasn't really aware of this until, a few years ago. Paul and Saul are a lot like Joshua and Jesus, okay? One is a Hebrew pronunciation of his name, and the other is the Greek pronunciation of his name. So, Saul and Paul are two ways to say the same guy's name, but that's still extremely important. In the book of Acts, he is introduced to us as Saul of Tarsus. He is Saul the Pharisee. He is Saul who sat at the feet of the teacher named Gamaliel. He was a Jew among Jews. He was the top of his class. What did he think of Gentiles at that time in his life? He didn't like them, did he? The Gentiles were trash. They were dirt. They were to be ignored. They were there. God's not concerned about the Gentiles. He's concerned with His people. But Jesus said that you are going to be my apostle to who? To the Gentiles. Paul recognizes that later on. He says, Christ, the same Jesus who made Peter the apostle to the Jews, made me the apostle to the Gentiles. And so in the book of Acts, when all of a sudden he starts being called by his Greek pronunciation, that means that he has accepted his role as an ambassador to the Gentile people that he originally would have ignored or persecuted. He did get the bigger job, didn't he? How many Jews are there in the world? That's a pretty small population. And there's only two tribes left, Judah and Benjamin. That's exactly right. And then everybody else, that falls under Paul. Good luck, Paul. You take the rest of them, right? Now, we do know that some of the other apostles, they did scatter and they taught some other people too. But specifically, Peter and Paul were given two ministries. And Paul, he had all the Gentiles, right? That's why the missionary journey that Peter takes in the book of Acts is not very long. He just goes up to the coast and then he comes back to Jerusalem. But Paul winds up going all the way to Rome, and then probably after the book of Acts goes all the way up into Spain and maybe even France. And we don't even think about that, but he probably made it all the way up into the European countries because he's the apostle to the Gentiles. There's a description in this chapter of the book where Brad Edwards talks about how important names are to our identity. And he says, the books of Moses, he says, just think about Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Just think about the books that Moses wrote. Now, Moses most likely wrote those books down while they were wandering through the wilderness for those 40 years. Okay? And during that period of wandering through the wilderness, don't you imagine that the Israelites had a lot of questions? Especially as their previous generation ages and begins to die in the wilderness, and a new generation of people are growing up, and they're trying to figure out who they are. Well, we're not from Egypt. we were slaves in Egypt, so if we're not Egyptian, then what are we? If we're not slaves, then who are we? What is our purpose? We don't have a home. We're just wandering. We're just nomads. Who are we supposed to be? And so part of what Moses does when he writes these 5 books, and he puts that down in front of them, is to tell them the story of who they are. The book of Genesis covers thousands of years of history because the book of Exodus starts with Moses. The book of Exodus starts with Egyptian slavery. So the first book of the Bible is from the time God makes the first thing in existence all the way up until just a couple of years ago for these people who are already wandering in the wilderness. And so Genesis is all about that. And names play a very important part in telling that story, right? In the beginning, God made Adam. I've told this story before. The teenagers, I told this to the teenagers, and so now I have a nickname. They call me Preacher Dirt. Preacher Dirt. Because Adam, the Hebrew word Adam, means dirt. Because that's what God made Adam out of. So he said, well, I made you out of dirt, so I'm going to call you Dirt. Which is not very flattering for a young boy growing up in middle school and getting picked on by folks. But most middle schoolers don't know Hebrew, so it's okay. It works out all right. But it begins with how God fashions the very first human out of the dust of the ground. And so he is called after that. He is earth because he is from the earth. Eve, what does Genesis tell us? Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. The mother of all living. Eve has this Hebrew connection to the word for life itself, right? Do some people get their name changed in the book of Genesis? There are, aren't there, right? Around about chapter 12, there's this guy named Abram, and Abram just means father. But God says, I have a plan for you, and I'm going to make you the what? The father of many nations. From you, all nations will be blessed. So eventually, Abram's name is changed to Abraham, so that can reflect that he is the father of many nations. Sarai is changed to Sarah, right? Abraham and Sarah, they have Isaac, right? Isaac gets married to Rebekah, and is that right? No, Isaac has 2 boys. What are the boys' names? That's who I'm worried about. The twins are Jacob and Esau, right? Jacob and Esau. So Jacob grows up, and one night on the riverbank, he is anticipating trouble, and so he has sent everybody away from him, and he spends this night by himself on the banks of the river. And what does he wind up doing all night long? He wrestles with God, the angel of the Lord. And at the conclusion of that wrestling match, it was going to end in a stalemate, and then the angel just reached out and dislocated Jacob's hip or something like that. It says it touched him in the hip and knocked him out. And he was like, okay, I'm done. And the angel said, you know what, we're not going to call you Jacob anymore. What did they change his, we're not going to call you Jacob. What did they change his name to? From Jacob, they changed his name to Israel. Because in Hebrew, Israel means the one who wrestles with God. And that's why we call them Israelites in the Bible. And that's why today they refer to themselves as Israelis. An Israelite and an Israeli are different. Don't make that mistake. I did that one time. Called a buddy of mine an Israelite. He was like, nope. Israeli is the modern term. Israelite is what they called themselves in the Bible because they were descendants of Israel. But it's also because, as a people, what did they tend to do over and over and over and over again? Fight against what God wanted. fight against God's plan for them. And so as Moses is telling these stories to them, and he's using these names, right, to begin to anchor their existence, and he says, we are the children of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel. And we trace back to Isaac, and we trace back to Abraham, and we trace back to Adam. And these names were very important. Some of you may have been given nicknames at different points of your life. I'm not really sure why, but some of my family from Mississippi, at some point, just a little while after you were born, my granddaddy was going to give you a nickname. And everybody's got one. And in my side of the family over there, we got Slick, and we got Jinshay, and we got Rico, and we got Rhino, and then there's me. And I'm Big Daddy. Now, I was Big Daddy long before I had this. So I don't know where that came from. I don't know what the connection is. But some of us in this room have nicknames, don't we? Right? I know some of them. I don't know all of them. But those nicknames, you know, they stick. They come out of somewhere, and they kind of tell us something, right? And names have a way of identifying us. When we say yes to one identity, we say no to others. We can't wear multiple personalities without going insane. He talks about, this example back in the class that I did from the 3 big questions. There was a slide that talked about Batman, and it talked about Bruce Wayne. And in this book, The Reason for Church, Brad Edwards says, eventually neither Bruce Wayne nor Batman knows who's wearing the mask. If you try to bounce back and forth between who you are, if you're one person to this group of people, and then you change how you act, or you change how you talk, or you change how you think with this group of people, and then you try to be somebody else over here, well, you've got multiple personalities. And if you're one way at church and you're another way at work, or if you're one way with your wife and then you're another way with your buddies, you get this multiple personality thing going on. And eventually you struggle because you don't know who you really are. And you feel empty. And so trying to answer that question, we get to the meaninglessness of everything. The first verse that I want you to look at tonight, I've got 6 if we get to them. But turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 1. Turn to the book of Ecclesiastes. And there's a theme, right, in the book of Ecclesiastes. There's a word that is the key word to understanding everything that the writer of Ecclesiastes is going to say, right? We're introduced to this writer in verse 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Probably Solomon. Doesn't say that for certain, but it's a very good inclination that these are the wisdoms of Solomon. And in verse 12 of Ecclesiastes 1, it says, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that's done under heaven. And then he says this, it is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is what? Vanity, meaningless. Anybody have a different word? Does that basically cover everybody's translation, what you've got? Striving after the wind. Good. All is a vanity and a striving after the wind. Have you ever tried to hold the wind in your hand? How successful is that? Go outside on a blistery day and try it. Go outside on a windy day. It's going to be that way, right? It's kite flying weather coming up as spring gets into the area, right? You pick a windy day, you wait till it's gusting 20 miles an hour. Go outside and just reach up, see if you can catch it. People are going to look at you funny because you can't do that. And yet, the writer of Ecclesiastes says, most of us spend our lives like we're trying to grab the wind. And it's going to be disappointing because it's meaningless. That word for meaningless or vanity. So, today when we hear the word vanity, I just think about a piece of furniture in the bedroom, right? Just a mirror on it, and it's got drawers, and that's where you sit when you want to look at yourself. Or I think about that song from the 70s, you're so vain, right? I bet you think this song is about you, don't you? Because you're so vain. But the Hebrew word that's meaningless or vanity is the same idea as a vapor, like a puff of smoke. It's the same idea as what Terry mentioned in the invitation that he gave before everybody went to their Bible class from the book of James. Your life is but a vapor. There is this meaningless vapor of vanity that most people spend their life chasing after because we are empty. So many people are empty on the inside. And the only way to fill that void is with God, but many of us spend our life trying to figure out who we are, or trying to create an identity, or trying to create a place to belong, or trying to force a purpose that we think is right without inviting God to be a part of that discussion. And Ecclesiastes says that is what brings the modern identity crisis that we're facing today. People don't know who they are because they are striving after the wind. They are grasping at the wind. And so what we're going to try to do is we're going to see some connections. So the 3 classes, right? I told you at the beginning. Each of these classes are about how we connect with something or someone. For instance, Lucas is right now on Sunday morning starting in the teenage class, starting in the high school class, but then he'll rotate to the young adult class and to the adult class in the back corner. And he's doing a class on mentorship and generations connecting to each other. So he's going to be talking in a class about how we can look at encouraging the generation before us to follow, about how we can appreciate the generation that's ahead of us and on whose shoulders we're standing, and how we can connect to the past and connect to the future with where we are. So whatever group that you're in. So he's talking to those young kids right now about how important it is to respect your elders, that kind of thing. Because there are lessons there that can be gained if they make that connection, right? And what the elders are doing is talking about how important it is that the members in a church connect with the leadership and the vision of that leadership. What does it mean to have to be a leader in the Lord's church? What does it mean to have to make decisions that will impact everybody in a church family? How much stress are they under? How much anxiety might that cause? How do they make those decisions? What kind of person does the Bible say it takes to be able to make those decisions well? And so how the church relates to the leadership and the decisions that leaders make and helps them out, right? In Hebrews chapter 13, for instance, it talks about it's our job to make sure that it's not a weary thing for our elders to do their job. We're supposed to try to make their job easier by how we respect and listen to them. So there's a connection there. And then what I have is an opportunity to turn the lens within each group. So there's the high school class, there's the young adult class, there's the adult class back there, and then there's this auditorium class right here. And the question to ask is, what does this group of people that we're currently talking about right now, what role does this group play in the health and in the future of the Petersville Church of Christ? So it's a very specific area where we look at things like, what does it mean to be a part of a particular group? Our young people in the high school class, right, they look forward to having events planned for them. They like youth rallies, and they have lock-ins, and they have summer camp, and they have devotionals at people's houses. And some of you who have grown up, and seen how kind of the life of the church works, you're familiar with this. We spend a lot of time, we pay somebody to be a youth minister. In a lot of churches that can afford it, we pay someone to plan these things and to do these things for our youth so that while they are growing up and at that very important stage of their life, they have a sense of a group identity. I'm part of the youth group, right? And then what happens once they graduate from high school? They lose their identity. Identity crisis. They're kicked out of the youth group, and then where do they go? Well, you're just a grown-up now. Congratulations. Get out of here. Ooh, you're old and dusty. We don't have anything for them anymore. Right? A lot of times we fail to recognize how important it is that our young people don't just feel like they have a particular place of belonging when they're in the youth group. Some churches have even taken it farther than that. A lot of, I don't know how many, but I will still say I have seen it happen many times where they do so much, they make such a big effort to help the kids feel like they're part of the youth group that they actually wind up separating the youth group out from the rest of the church altogether. Have you ever noticed that before? They don't, the youth group doesn't participate in church activities. Some places I have seen build a youth center. And on a Wednesday night like tonight, those teenagers will go straight to that youth center. They will spend their entire time with each other in that youth center. They will do activities. They will play games. They will have their own singing. They will have their own teaching. They will do everything together, completely in a different building than the rest of the people that are meeting on that property. Well, they really like each other, but what's the mistake that's been made there? They've been isolated. We have segregated, we have separated them. And so then it's even harder once they finish high school, once they get kicked out of that building, and now they come into this new place, like, I don't even know where to go in this place. I've never been here before. And this is where we're supposed to be all part of one body, one family, one church. So there's an identity that exists with each of these groups. Are the needs of a high school student the same spiritual needs as someone who's in their 40s and 50s? No. Some of them may have some similarities, but you are at a different stage of life and you have different spiritual needs at that time. And so we don't do the same things with all of those groups because we recognize you need something specific and particular to you that may not be effective, that may not work, that may not encourage somebody in another group. And so what my goal is going to be with the class is to help identify what are the characteristics that make this group, that make up the people in this group. Is it just age? Is it stage of life? Is it the types of problems that they're dealing with? Is it what are some problems? What are some complications and difficulties that people go through at different stages in life that would apply to one group but don't apply to all the other groups? I'm thinking about what Miss Judy Myrick said earlier in class. We don't say it again. High school kids don't have to worry about that one very much, do they? Right? Nope. Jobs, right? Macy started her first day of her real life today, right? So you tell her, give her a pat on the back if you see Macy tonight. She has worked her tail off for the past 4 years. She's had 3 jobs and done full-time college to get through that experience. So she has worked, but all of those have been what? Part-time. They've all been temporary. Her focus was, I got to get through class, I got to get through school, I got to get that diploma, I got to get that certificate, I got to finish this program so that I can go out and get my real job, right? And today was her first day at the real job, right? And that's a pretty stressful minute. Now, most of the people 45 and older won't have to worry about your first day at work anymore. You've already been there. You've done that. You might change jobs. That might be a stressful situation, but figuring out what life looks like when you have a regular 9-to-5 job every day, well, that's a particular problem for young adults. But high school kids don't know what that's like. The kids in 10th grade, they don't know what that's like because they know they're supposed to be focusing on school, and then maybe they can get an after-school job or something. Can you think of some other situations, difficulties that exist for a particular group that wouldn't apply to others? Retirement. Again, 19-year-olds don't have to worry about that, do they? 19-year-olds don't think they'll ever retire. She had to sign she sent Autumn and I a picture in a text message. And the picture said, I signed up for my employer's 401k. But I don't think I can run that far. 5K, 401k, those are different. But she's 19. She's not thinking about retirement. She's not thinking about that at all. But we're having to help her. We're having to tell her, look, darling, start it now. It'll be here before you know it. But when you're 19, that's 1,000 years away. You don't worry about that at all. But then you turn around, Judy, and it's here. What did he say? That's right. Staying busy keeps you young, doesn't it? And then you retire and you wake up, wait a minute, where did that come from? Sneaks up on you. And so what do you do with that? All of a sudden your schedule changes a lot. I know some people that say, well, after I retired, I've never been this busy before. And then I know other people who are like, well, I have earned my retirement and I'm good. But then there's that idea, and I have to speak, I can't speak from experience on this, but one of the things that we say about someone who's retired is they've been put out to pasture. Turns out that's not a very flattering thought, is it? I retired yesterday, I'm retired again today. But does that mean you're done? Does that mean you're finished? Does that mean you're washed up? I mean, that's what I feel like a lot of times the idea that we get is. And so finding that purpose is very significant and very important. So the goal of this class is to see what the connections are within the group itself. And then we ask the question, so what do we need? What does this group need? Because the things that the high schoolers need are not the same things that the adult class needs, right? But we also ask another question. What role does your group play in making Petersville great, in making us who we are? Because do the teenagers have to wait until they're in their 30s to be a successful and effective part of the Lord's church? Absolutely not. But we've got to figure out how to give them those opportunities. It's up to us to make a way for them to belong. Bob. And that's exactly one of the things that we're going to talk about in this particular class is the example that we set. Regardless of age, regardless of stage, regardless of station, regardless of gender, whatever's going on in your life, the people that are in this room have extreme power and potential, first and foremost by the example that you set. And so looking at those things, what is it that makes this group special? What is it that we bring to the table? What do you need to grow? What is it that and so these are conversations, these are questions that we will unfold and we'll unpack. Because being a part of the Petersville Church of Christ, not just being a part of the church, but being a part of the Petersville Church of Christ is not about a bunch of saved individuals. It is about a unified body of believers who work together. And that's where we'll start next week, because we're going to look at those verses. Instead of the Ecclesiastes image, instead of the meaningless of life and the grasping at wind, striving to grab the wind, we're going to see how being part of the body helps us with this identity crisis that we're talking about tonight. So I'm excited about that, and I'm looking forward to sharing these ideas with you over the next 3 months. And hopefully you will come up with some great ideas to add to it, and we'll have a good discussion and a lot of feedback. So thank you very much for that, and we'll look forward to picking it up next week. Have a great week.